Malsburg.
I think the prosecution of George Zimmerman was disgraceful. I am gratified by the jury's verdict, as happy as I am for George Zimmerman. I'm thrilled that this jury kept this tragedy from becoming a travesty. For that we are eternally grateful. But it makes me sad, too, that it took this long, under these circumstances, to finally get justice.
All right, that's defense attorney Don West speaking after the verdict on Saturday night. Welcome to hour number 2 of the Steve Malsburg Show, and joining us once again to give us her view on what has happened and what is happening and what will happen, all three, is Tamara Holder, attorney and Fox News Legal Analyst. And I got the name the way it's supposed to be this time, right?
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Most men don't get things right the first time, but you're a pro.
Well, no, this is the second time. I mean, I got it wrong last time we spoke, right?
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Oh.
This is the first time you got it right.
Oh, okay, I got you. All right. So, your take on Saturday night's verdict?
I think that it was a fair verdict. I'm very, very disappointed in the civil rights groups and civil rights, quote, leaders, unquote, who are upset and saying that justice hasn't been served. Not only am I a lot of people think I'm this, crazy liberal, but like you said, I'm a lawyer. And the best thing about our judicial system, although it's not perfect, is that we generally have fair trials. And if anybody had a fair trial, it was George Zimmerman. He had, there were, I believe, 58 witnesses. The jury questionnaire was filled out by 211 prospective jurors and whittled down to 40, and then they got to 6. All 6 of the jurors who were picked were the ones who made the final decision. Of course, one was dismissed, who was an alternate, but there was no sign of impropriety or just whatever, and any kind of illegal misconduct on the part of the jurors. And this is how Lady Justice is supposed to work. It's unfortunate that the state didn't have enough evidence to convict him in this case or in any case, if they're prosecuting, obviously. But it's fortunate for the defense that they were able to show that they didn't meet their burden beyond a reasonable doubt.
All right, and you talk about the so-called civil rights people. First of all, I mean, let me tell you, let you hear something Ben Crump, the attorney for the family, said. And by the way, this was echoed by Jesse Jackson. And to me, as a white person, I take offense at it. Listen to the first cut I told you about, the 55, the Crump cut. Here we go.
This morning, Martin Luther King's daughter, Dr. Bernice King, tweeted me a message that read, "Today is a defining moment for the status of my father's dream." Whatever the Zimmerman verdict is, she tweeted, in the words of my father, we must conduct ourselves on the higher plane of dignity and discipline. Trayvon Martin will forever remain in the annals of history next to Medgar Evers and Emmett Till as symbols for the fight for equal justice for all.
Now, for those who don't know, Emmett Till was for speaking to a white woman, was dragged out of his bed by 2 men, including the husband of the woman and his brother, given a brutal murder, had barbed wire tied around his neck, hanged, thrown into a river with weights around his body. And to compare what that symbolized and what that means and what that young man, that 14-year-old boy went through to this, and Jesse Jackson said the same thing. I do not get it. I do not get it.
Well, it's just really unfortunate that civil rights leaders, and by the way, I've worked with Jesse Jackson Sr. for years. I have I know Al Sharpton. I've been on his radio show and worked with him a little bit as well. So they do good work. However, I just, the part that bothers me that most people aren't talking about is that civil rights is not just about blacks or whites. It is also about gender. And we had a 6-person, all-woman jury that these men and these civil rights groups are now saying is a slap in the face to America. I mean, that's what Al Sharpton said. He said that their decision was a slap in the face. A slap in the face is, in my opinion, the most disrespectful thing somebody can do to another besides spit in their face. How dare he say that? That's discrimination. That's a discriminatory comment. We should respect the women. We should respect their decision and move forward and find out what we can learn. Do we need to behave this way towards one another? Those are the conversations we should be having.
Well,
but Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, the case is over.
Well, it's that case is over, but the media is not letting it die, and neither is Angela Corey. And as an attorney, I've asked several attorneys this already. I'd be curious to your opinion. Angela Corey was asked on Headline News. It's going to air tonight, but it's been airing on CNN all day long. She sat there with the entire prosecution team, and they asked the announcer, the anchor said, George Zimmerman, and he wanted a response, a one-word response. Angela Corey paused for about 15, 20 seconds and said, murderer.
It's a tragedy. I can't. Do I think that George Zimmerman was hypersensitive? Yes. Do I have certain feelings about George Zimmerman and his behavior? Yes. But I also have the utmost respect for our judicial system and those jurors. And the prosecutors had their chance. The defense put on their case as well. And those jurors made a decision that he's not a murderer. He didn't not only murder, he didn't commit manslaughter. What do we want in America today? Do we want public lynchings? Do we want stonings? Is that what would make these people happy? What would have been the right answer? An all-black jury that found him guilty? One black?
Well,
man?
I'm glad you said that, because talking about a distortion, again, sometimes I wonder if it's ignorance of the facts in the law, because to this day I keep hearing, I heard it this morning over and over, how George Zimmerman was told not to leave the car, which of course he wasn't told not to leave the car. But that's beside the point. Listen to what Jesse Jackson, Jesse Jackson said about the jury makeup on, I think it was MSNBC yesterday. Here we go.
Well, it was a stretch trying to avoid the obvious that there was no, you speak of a jury of your peers, there was no man on the jury, and Trayvon was a black boy. There was no man, no black on the jury, so at least the idea of a jury of peers was a stretch all the while.
Of course, the jury of his peers is for George Zimmerman, not for Trayvon. Duh.
No, but here's the thing that Reverend Jackson, who like I said, I know and respect, and I'm going to call him after this and correct him. There is no constitutional requirement that you were tried by a jury of your peers.
No, obviously, but not only that is he, but he's telling the world that Trayvon didn't get a jury of his peers.
Right, and so now we're saying that if you're a black victim, Reverend Jackson said that there wasn't a black person on the jury. So if you're a black person, should we now change the law that if you're a black person, you should have a black person on the jury? If you're a black victim, then you have to have a black person on the jury. It's just not right. And like I said in the beginning of this interview, we had both the prosecution and the defense go through 211 questionnaires. They whittled them down. Both sides looked for jurors that they thought would make a decision in their favor. This is a chess game. It's all about picking the right jurors and also putting together your case properly. How is this verdict improper?
Well, it's racist. I had just had a Syracuse professor who you may be familiar with, Dr. Boyce Watkins, who wrote a piece saying that there's no logical reason that any court other than a racist one would convict George Zimmerman. So we went at it for 12, 15 minutes, and I begged him for any evidence. And all he came up with was George Zimmerman had a gun, and if he didn't chase him, none of this would have happened. And I said, that's not the law. I said that none of what George Zimmerman did up until the conflict was against the law, and nobody and the people who were supporting or against the verdict and trying to change George Zimmerman into some animal don't want to talk about the law.
Right, and or talk about, just like I said, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but to talk about how George Zimmerman received a fair trial. If you want to be upset, I would say be upset with the police, be upset with the fact that they failed to properly, not investigate, but just in the beginning, gather evidence. I submit that somebody should put together a law on the books that in the event that there's a killing, whether it's in self-defense and justified or not, that the police investigate it in the event that it could be possibly a crime. There were certain things that the police totally screwed up on, and it shouldn't have happened. And there was a possibility that a crime was committed here, and they overlooked it. But we also saw that in O.J. Simpson. A lot of evidence didn't come in because they messed up.
But there was really no evidence that I mean, what evidence could the police have come up with that didn't make it into court that could have changed the outcome? I mean, what?
Well, I believe that, for example, Trayvon Martin's clothes were not, they sat in a plastic bag for weeks. They did not take, my biggest problem.
Well, no, they went to the autopsy. No, the medical examiner who looked like, it was a comedy show, the body was in the bag with the clothes, and he said the clothes were taken off. So Steve,
my point is that I'm not trying to retry the case here.
But I just don't see any evidence. Look, the cops did investigate, and they found that there was no reason to arrest him.
No, but the problem is, again, I believe that in the event, a boy was killed, a person was killed. That's a tragedy. I don't care what anybody says.
Absolutely.
That is a tragedy, and it was a violent death. He died with a gunshot wound to his chest. And George Zimmerman had injuries. Why the police didn't take him to the the hospital instead of the police station is beyond me. One of the things that was brought out in trial is that
he didn't want to go.
Well, but he should have gone. He had visible injuries.
But you can't force somebody to go to the hospital.
Sure, but if there is a law that requires something like that.
All right, so you're saying going forward, but then you also said that because the police screwed up, evidence might not have made it in like in OJ, but I don't see anything. I'm not retrying the case. I just don't see anything. The body was examined by the medical examiner. It was taken.
Right.
I mean, so I don't see anything that the police left out. Pictures were taken of his face, etc. He was examined by his own doctor the next day. So I don't see how the police screwed this up, and possibly because of that, evidence was not given to the prosecution or available to the prosecution, and he would have been found a different verdict.
I just think that the police should have done a better job in their investigation, whether or not and that would have, I think, maybe helped to ease these racial tensions. Had they done certain things, certain standard operating procedures, certain protocol, had that been in place, maybe there wouldn't have been the tension that there is today and that there was the day after on February 29th.
Gotcha.
And up until then. And this isn't a perfect case. There were no eyewitnesses. There were some ear witnesses. Rachel Gentile, who, by the way, I believe the civil rights leaders want to scream and talk about injustice, should go to the public schools in Stanford.
I'll tell you where she should have gone. She should have been held in contempt of court for her actions in that courtroom, her faces, her attitude. And I'm telling you, if she were white, she would have been held.
But people, that's why witnesses their credibility is based on not only what they say, but their courtroom demeanor. And she hurt the prosecution. She was just one person, and there's been a lot of talk of this. All of these witnesses that were prosecution witnesses ended up helping the defense.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
She didn't help the prosecution.
No, and by the way, she's on with Piers Morgan tonight, which should be quite an interesting interview. Hey, Tamara, thank you so much. I look forward to the next time we speak.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Thanks for getting my name right.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care.
Yeah.
Well, after all, Tamara said Steve correctly, so I felt it was incumbent upon me.